Well, it's 1 o'clock. Let's get started. I'd like to remind everyone that this session is being recorded. If you do have questions, if you would put them into the chat, and after the formal presentation, we'll answer your questions from the chat. I'd like to welcome our speaker today, Dr. Daniel Yezbick, who is a professor of English and Communications at St. Louis Community College, Wildwood, where he teaches media and writing courses. His retrospective celebration of the American children's artist, George Carlson, Perfect Nonsense, was released in 2014 from Fantagraphic Books, and his recent essays on media and culture have appeared in a variety of journals and anthologies, including The Blacker the Ink, The Other 1980s, Monstrous Women in Comics, Disney Channel Tween Programming, the Palgrave Handbook of the Zombie, and the Oxford Handbook of Comic Studies. His presentation today of Letters and Lace, Milton Caniff's Comics and the Cultural Conflicts of World War II, kind of is nice to have as we celebrate just recently last Tuesday, Veterans Day, and a look at popular culture of the 1940s. Would you please welcome Dr. Daniel Yezbick? Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Joanne, and thank you, Kirsten, and thank you, everyone, for having me. I'm delighted to be here. I will spend the next 45 minutes going back in time and looking at what I hope are a lot of really interesting images that will give you a new perspective on the American culture of World War II, and also hopefully some voices that are going to come out of the past to greet us that have not been seen or heard of in decades, as we look through some archival documents to help us out. So let's go ahead and get started. First of all, I want to wish everyone a very good Veterans Week and thank all the veterans for their service. This is such an important week for us to be talking about this. Caniff himself was deeply devoted to the armed forces. He was 4F. He had a bad leg, so he could not serve. And he always felt tremendous loss or lack for that. So he did everything he could for the war effort. He did chalk talks for war bond drives. He did hundreds and hundreds of drawings for armed forces posters and manuals. He answered every armed forces letter he could possibly get, and offered people in service in all over the world all kinds of extra advantages. And later, after the war, he was deeply involved in the founding of the Air Force. He was in love with air travel and airplanes in general, and he was an honorary officer in the Air Force for helping to get it established. So just want to get that out there before I forget. And the other, I want to thank everyone for being here, and I want to thank the STLC Libraries for having me. But the two people I really have to thank for this work at all, one of them is a good old friend and teacher who passed away a few years ago, Dr. Bob Harvey, who was really the American master of comic strip history. He wrote book after book after book about this very important medium that is truly American. Comic strips really were more or less in their full form comic strips and comic books born out of American culture. And he was especially fond of Milton Caniff. And in editing his official biography of Caniff that you see there, that's where I first discovered that these letters existed at the Ohio State University archives. And I told him how much those documents were really, how important they could be. And he encouraged me to start looking at them. So I want to thank him for that. And then my good friend and colleague, Dr. Christy Knopf, who I could not do this without. Dr. Knope is an acknowledged scholar of politics and war culture, military culture. Her books, The Comic Art of War and Politics in the Gutters, American Politicians and Elections in the Comic Book Media, are seminal works about politics and art. And she was going to be here today, but she had a conflict. She was going to hopefully heckle me a little. But we've done a lot of projects together, and I can't recommend her work enough. So I want to thank them both here. I also want to thank the Ohio State University Billy Ireland Museum for giving Dr. Knope and I the Lucy Caswell Award so that we could do the research. It was a funding award that allowed us to go to a lot of people call the Temple of Comic Art. You can see it's a big, beautiful building right in the center of the OSU campus. And the curators there, Jenny Robb and Caitlin McGurk, are true professionals. They love multimodal art. They love comics. They love toys. They love paintings. They love all the things of our childhoods that help determine who we are and help determine how generations take interest in different things. And their crack troops, their curators, pulled everything they could for us when we went to do this work. So I really owe them a lot of thanks as well. And then just to show you where this work has been going, we did the work a few years ago. We've done a couple of conference talks in 2022 and 2023, but the first print work to come out of these archival explorations are going to show up in 2026. There's going to be an article, Bombs and Bombshells, Aluminum and Lace, in the British Journal of Illustration, and then a chapter on the letters that we're going to show you today in the forthcoming book, Documenting Lives, Comics Representation and Activism Across Cultures. So those are, I'm certainly looking forward to them. I hope other people will as well. So this is our sort of table of contents for today. This is our mission report. We're going to meet and greet Milton Caniff, Terry Lee, and Miss Lace, his most important characters. We're going to look at some of his landmark works, especially the Pilot's Creed and Mail Call, and a couple other important moments. We'll look at writing to Caniff from various war zones all around the world during World War II. And then we'll look at writing that he received from the home front as well. And then as kind of a climax, big finish, we'll look at a bouquet of the insignia that he designed gratis for a large number of armed forces units. And then, of course, some Q&A. You can see, I'm going to go back a second. You can see that he was quite a celebrity in his time. There was a time when cartoonists really did have a lot of cultural agency. He was on the radio a lot. He toured and did chalk talks, performances for charities. He was deeply involved in the Boy Scouts of America. He was deeply involved in a lot of other charities as well. So he did make the cover of Time magazine at one time. You can see the characters from Terry in the background there. Terry and the Pirates, even though it's largely forgotten now, was probably the world's most important comic strip throughout the 1940s. It began in the 30s, but by the 1940s, it became kind of a cultural habit. Everybody read it. Every newspaper syndicated it. Everybody shared and clipped it. Kids, middle schoolers, teenagers, young adults, college students, families, seniors, everyone knew everything happening in Terry. It was kind of a national action adventure soap opera. So it's important for us to understand just how incredibly influential and ubiquitous this strip was. Everybody would meet and just talk about what happened in Terry on Sunday, or they'd follow the daily stories, and characters would. It's a massive cast of probably close to 100 characters who come and go at different times. So there was always a lot of drama and suspense at who would show up next. On top of that, Caniff, again, feeling guilty or just driven that he could not contribute to the armed forces directly, he developed a special comic strip just for armed forces newspapers. It appeared in Camp Papers and Stars and Stripes and Yank Magazine, and it was called Mail Call. And it was a little less family oriented. It was a little more about camp life, and it focused mostly on the grunts. There's very few officers or very few sort of war heroes in the book. It's really about this character, Miss Lace, who is she's a pinup, but she's also very much about the everyday soldier, the sort of Willie and Joe characters, and about treating them better and giving them a little bit of a morale boost. And it's very, very funny. But it was a little more, I won't say necessarily adult, but it was written for adult soldiers. So we'll get a feel as we go forward. So I do have some disclaimers and trigger warnings. The material you're going to see, visual and prose, there are a variety of pinup images, female and male, that were developed to titillate and tease and entertain. They are inherently objectifying, but they are meant to be entertaining and affecting in contrast to the more immediate dangers, terrors, and tragedies of war. So instead of injury and death and pain, these images are meant to substitute for that. Terry and the Pirates is about American adventurers in the Far East. So there's a lot of ethnic stereotyping. There is a lot of Orientalism. And of course, when we're dealing with the enemy, there's a lot of pretty horrible, dehumanizing stereotypes. And I ask that we read those with the appropriate level of historical contextualization. And then I've always believed this, and this is something that Dr. Harvey always said, Bob Harvey always said, all cartooning as an art form is inherently subversive, because the two major tools of cartooning are caricature and exaggeration. And if you think of all the different presidential editorial cartoons we've seen over the years, Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, Eisenhower, Wilson, Obama, Trump, everybody, it's their job to exaggerate, both as a statement of enduring American freedom of speech, but also for a form of ridicule and satire and dissent. So a lot of the art we're going to see is purposely exaggerated for those reasons. And the politics of representation are always part of any critical conversation relating to the past. And I think the kind of visual archaeology that I like to do really shows us that people looked and saw and experienced images and words and multimodal languages very differently than we do. And I do also want to let people know it's probably about a PG-13 presentation, so there's nothing horribly offensive to be concerned with, nothing particularly vulgar or explicit or violent. Okay? So let's go ahead and do this. What was Terry and the Pirates? Milton Caniff, who lived from 1907 to 1988, worked on Terry and the Pirates. He invented the strip in 1934. It was a daily comic strip with a colorful color Sunday page. And in 1946, he left the strip and handed it over to a different cartoonist and created his other great success, Steve Canyon, which is more of a Cold War story. But we're going to focus on, a lot of people say that really Terry and the Pirates ends when Caniff leaves. It doesn't have the same power after that. But it's the first major serial comic strip epic based in both realism and exoticism. We've had Tarzan, we had Buck Rogers, things like that. But Milton Caniff was a realist. He cared about what the landscapes looked like. He cared what the machines and the vehicles looked like. He cared that the clothes looked like real clothes. And he really cared that his humans acted like real humans, not Popeye, not Superman, but were actually real people in perilous or exciting or dangerous situations. And as any cartoonist will tell you, he is a master of blacks, of shadow and line and heavy dark inks to create depth. Nobody works in the chiaroscuro vein like Milton Caniff does. So it's also a very sophisticated intercultural story with lots of politics, of post-colonial conflict, crime, romance, humor, and eroticism. There's a lot of kissing. There's a lot of crushes. There's a lot of longing for each other. Circumstances are always pulling couples away from each other at different times. And it begins with the adventures of Pat Ryan, who is a tough Irish-American adventurer, and his kid sidekick, Terry Lee. And they go off to the Far East to hunt treasure, and almost immediately they wind up getting wrapped up in all kinds of other things. They never actually get to find the treasure that Terry and the Pirates was really about. And they're good prototypes for Indiana Jones, for James Bond, and for the sort of rollicking, campy, farcical good humor that you get out of Goonies or even a little bit out of Stranger Things. It begins, as I said, as a Far East treasure hunting serial adventure, but once the war starts, and since his characters are already in the Far East, it becomes really very much about everyone versus the Japanese Imperial Army. And everyone, most of the criminals in the early years of the series suddenly become freedom fighters. Most of them tend to enlist and start working for the Allies in different ways. And the two most important characters that everyone sort of remembers is the famous pirate queen, the Dragon Lady, and Burma, the super spy. Burma, the super spy, she's a mistress of disguise. She changes her hair, she changes her clothes, she shows up suddenly out of the blue. And I think it's important for us to know that whenever Burma is about to appear again, she'll disappear for years from the strip and then come back in new and unexpected ways. But whenever she comes back, there's a tell. You can see this is her dressed up in an outfit, and this general is saying, some music sounds like a Punjab polka. It's not. It's the St. Louis Blues. And anyone who knows Burma, who knows every time the St. Louis Blues plays, she's about to reappear. So a little bit of St. Louis comic strip history for you. I always thought that was. It was a massive success. Everyone loved the story. The comic strip was one of the most highly syndicated. There were comic book extensions. There were radio shows. It was one of the very first. There was a sort of a forgettable series of movie serials, but it was one of the first high-end action adventure TV shows. Very early television adaptation. There were children's books, and then a lot more. And then now in the 21st century, it's considered there are all kinds of special archival editions. It's considered a masterwork of world comics and one of the great American stories. There are versions for every price point. The smaller IDW volumes are about $25 a piece, and there's 6 volumes. The larger master collection is much, much more expensive, but also everyone that I know who reads Terry never stops. Once they get started, it's very addictive. The intro, the way the characters develop, the way they're put into danger, the way they care for each other and love each other. There's just a lot in Terry that you don't expect the sort of mature, dramatic depth out of a comic strip, which is us being a little bit biased. But trust me, it is well worth the read, especially in the war years. So that's what it is, if you didn't know. His other strip, Mail Call, had a much more niche-oriented audience. It was featured only in camp newspapers and official armed forces periodicals. It had relaxed censorship, so he could get a little more risque. He could get a little more mature and sophisticated in terms of sexual themes. He famously used models to sort of develop Miss Lace, and he and several Miss Lace models went on tour to raise money for war bonds, doing drawings and building up morale. Mail Call was originally about Burma, the blonde super spy, but the newspaper editors complained that they were losing money because it was an unsyndicated strip. So he brought in her brunette friend, Miss Lace. And there's a lot of pinups in World War II. There's a lot of pinups all through the 20th century. And, pinups have a deservedly bad rap for objectifying the bodies that they depict as, semi-pornographic kind of material, or maybe even outright. But Miss Lace is different. She is a pinup. She's a fashion plate, but Miss Lace talks back. She's got quips and retorts and wisecracks. She cares deeply about the boys at the camp that she encourages and helps. She can be really sweet. She can be really tough. The thing she does more than anything else is feed them. She's always giving them food, or she'll let them rest on her couch, or she'll talk to them. She'll help them write letters home even. So she's not strictly about sex and sexuality. And she only is interested in the grunts, only in the enlisted men. She's not interested in officers. She calls them generals to sort of buck up their morale. And there's something really beautiful about that. This romantic interest, they all want to date her, but you never actually see her on an actual date. Instead, she's sort of hosting parties for them. She makes Thanksgiving dinner for them. She helps them call their mother when they're afraid their mother's mad at them, stuff like that. It's a very, very fun strip. And her fashions would also really help to define the time. And you can see here, this is certainly a pinup, but there's an awful lot of personality here. There's an awful lot of respect for the power of the glamorous woman in this image. She's much more sophisticated than she is just an objectified body. And that's kind of what makes Miss Lace special. Even Caniff said, Miss Lace took over what I wanted to do. Her voice was her own, and she told me what she wanted in the strips. And if you've ever worked creatively, you know how some characters just insist on telling you what they want. That's kind of how this worked. So I want to share one Miss Lace mail call strip with you, because I think it's really important. This is from June of 1944. And the nice thing about mail call is it always had these little gags that were in military lingo up at the top. Charge without reconnaissance. And this strip is about her beaux, her boyfriends, seeing that she's dancing with what they think is a civilian. So what's this here? Miss Lace dancing with a clinking civilian? I always thought she had some rich 4F on the string. Where else does she get all them clothes? Yeah, and come to think of it, why ain't that Jody in uniform? He looks healthy enough. You said it. They're coming off the floor. Watch me needle him. So these guys who are in service to their country are thinking he's just a spoiled rich kid, or someone who's too afraid to fight. Or they would often say, I'm working in essential industry. I have a job that's so important to the war effort, I can't enlist. So this guy ribs him and pushes him, shoves him. Hiya, bub. How are things in essential industry? Lace, where are you? Oh, there you are. I got sort of panicky for a minute. Didn't someone say something to me? Yes, General. It's a GI, also back from the South Pacific. He wants to shake your hand. And you can see that the other soldier, who was equally upset, they both realized that this man was wounded in combat and he's now blind. And Lace immediately tries to endorse and support this person who is now visually handicapped. This is unheard of for its time. You don't have strips like this very often. There's another example where she's dating a soldier who's lost his arm, or she's taking him out for a movie, and someone on the street makes a comment about him, and she belts him and knocks him out because she can't stand the comment that's been made about this man who gave his arm for the cause. So this is the kind of stuff that we see with Miss Lace. So I just want to give you a sample, and that's a warm up for what is probably the single most important comic strip of the 20th century. This is a Sunday strip from 17th October 1943, and it was so beloved by readers, it's now called the Pilot's Creed, that it was read into the congressional record that following Monday by California Rep. Carl Hinshaw. And Terry, who starts Terry and the Pirates as a kid, he grows up and he joins the war effort, and Caniff creates a character named Flip Corkin, who is based on the celebrity general, the actual general, Phil Cochran. And in this one, Terry has finished his flight training. He's joining the Air Corps, probably to help out with the invasion of Japan. And step by step throughout this strip, Flip Corkin talks to Terry and gives him this pep talk about how every single element of the armed forces is interconnected. So he says, if you look at this one here, you find yourself in a position to defend the country that gave you the weapon with which to do it. But it wasn't just you who were in those wings. A ghostly echelon of good guys flew their hearts out in old kites to give you the know-how. And some smart slide rule jokers, engineers, sweated out over drawing boards to give you a machine that will keep you up there shooting. And don't forget that every bullet you shoot, every gallon of gas and oil you burn was brought here by transport pilots who flew it over the worst terrain in the world. You may get the glory, but they put the lift in your balloon. And don't let me ever catch you being high bicycle with the enlisted men in your ground crew. Without them, you'd never get 10 feet off the ground. Every grease monkey in that gang is right beside you in that cockpit, and their hands are on that stick just the same as yours. You'll get angry as the devil with the Army and its so-called red tape, but be patient with it. Somehow the old eagle has managed to end up in possession of the ball in every war since 1776. That's not historically true, but we'll go with it. So just humor it along. Okay, sport, end of speech. When you get up in that wild blue yonder, the song talks about, remember, there are a lot of good guys missing from mess tables in the South Pacific, Alaska, Africa, Britain, Asia, and back home who are sort of counting on you to take it from here. Good night, kid. And the last thing you see is This Way to Tokyo, spelled wrong on purpose. This had such an effect on the American public and on the armed forces, just to show you, not only was it read into the congressional record, but in Foster Field, Texas, and in several officers' clubs all over the world, they actually turned it into murals and built it in and built very carefully, turned it into sort of almost like a triptych in a church for the soldiers and the pilots to look at. This is my favorite. This is clearly a publicity photo, but still, you can see all the pilots looking up at what would be called the Pilot's Creed. Same thing from Foster Field, Texas. And these images are from the Milton Caniff archives at OSU. I don't think they've been published in 70 years, so it's good to see them now. And then he's less famous for this, but this is going to matter to us tremendously. Every Christmas, as you probably know, comic strips at Christmas time, they're often going to celebrate every holiday. So there's usually a Christmas gag, a Santa gag, a reindeer gag or something. But Terry and the Pirates was different. Every Christmas was always about gratitude and appreciation. And this is one of the most famous ones, partially because it's so gorgeous to look at. It really is a masterful view of mountains and an airplane and just the monumental scale of these blacks that Caniff would use. But I'm going to read this for you, and then you'll see why this is so important. White Christmas, Himalaya's version. Quite beautiful, except for the zeros and rocks in the clouds and the downdrafts. But the right guys who push our stuff over the hump to China wouldn't want to worry you on your holiday. That's why they risk it. So you can look at the American sky and see nothing more dangerous than snow. And it was just a daily strip that would have been published on Christmas Day. You can see here the date, 12/25. And this is one of the most interesting letters that we found as we went through about 3,000 letters in the Milton Caniff files at OSU. This is from Janie A. Moore, May 1st, 1945, from Tulsa, Oklahoma. My son, Lieutenant Chaspy Moore Jr., flew the hump 78 times, but crashed and was killed on his way home. We are placing a picture as a memorial to him in the educational building of our local church. Christmas Day 1944, our paper carried a picture of a C-46 flying the hump in your Terry strip. We wondered if you could or would make us a drawing of that suitable for framing for our recreation room. Our son loved to fly and loved his C-46. He was a passenger on the one that crashed in the Himalayas in Assam, India. Young people love mountains and flying. We feel a picture like this would commemorate something our son loved and give substance to dreams other boys might have. So you can see a simple comic strip can have such an impact in terms of a mourning family, in terms of their sense of grief and their sense of dedication to the cause, and their sense of wanting their son's memory to go on to inspire others. All this comes out of that one comic strip. This is another one, a different Christmas. I think it was the year after the war. And this one's especially interesting because Caniff was, of course, we knew what PTSD was at the time, and there were some therapies and treatments that were involved, but Caniff was way ahead of his time in terms of just making it a public concern. So this is, and there he is with one of his little mastheads again. There is a kindly mood of melancholy. I'm going to show you, this is the published version that appeared in the newspaper, and this is the original art. If you want to, if the artists in the audience want to get a look at that Christmas tree and that work on the housewife's hair, it really is spectacular. Don't be too surprised if your particular good Joe seems to be thinking of something else at this time today. It isn't that he's not happy to be at home instead of in some half-frozen hole or on a hot Pacific island. But it is on occasions like this that the swiftly fading faces of men who will never see another Christmas tree or hear a kid laugh start to parade out around his memory to the soft beat of muffled drums. Let him have those moments from yesterday. He's probably thinking how even a toss it was that put another guy's name on that clothesline, on that close one. Give him the present of a little time with old friends who are being forgotten all too soon. Again, remarkably sensitive for its time. And now I want to show you some of the letters that are just from the rank and file camps that are all over the world and also in basic training, just to show you how pervasive the influence of Terry and the Pirates was. This is from January 22nd, 1942. No other comic strip holds more interest than Terry and the Pirates. In fact, many times I've noticed a mechanic waiting to service an airplane, sitting against the hangar, pipe in one hand and a comic book in the other. Food, women, and comics, in the order mentioned, seem to be the order of preference for the rank and file soldier. These are two letters from two very different places. One from Annapolis in 1945. There are 3,000 midshipmen in this place, of whom 2,999 are avid readers of Terry and the Pirates. The other guy is saving his eyes. Incidentally, if you happen to have an old scrap of paper with lace all over it, I have a bare spot in my locker to put it. So this is someone on the home front clearly training to be an officer. And then this one is, the one below it is even more interesting. 17th November 1944. We are two GIs in an armored outfit somewhere in Germany. We have often yearned to be able to place a picture of one of your sexy, voluptuous subjects on the wall of our home. At present, a foxhole. This from Camp San Luis Obispo. I apologize. There are 5 other fellows in my tent besides myself, and we have kind of formed a little group to read Terry after the duty hours. Right now, with our training and preparation for a long trip in the somewhat distant future, Terry has become more enjoyable to us than ever. I know I speak for others in the service as well as my buddies and myself when I say thanks. Just keep Terry in there pitching. I think this one's especially nice because he hasn't even asked for a pinup or a letter or anything. He just wants to tell Caniff how successful his strip is. This one's from the Marine Corps Air Station at Cherry Point, North Carolina. Regulations allowed no pinup pictures here at the station, and if you find that you have a sketch that you do care to donate to the building up of the fighting urge and esprit of myself and my particular buddies, it will be kept tenderly and with reverence in my footlocker. So there were certain CEOs who didn't want pinups all over the place. They had to keep them private. So the footlocker becomes a place not just to keep stuff dry and organized, but also a place where you can fantasize a little bit. This one's especially interesting because it mentions a different strip. The author of Black Fury, which is not the right name, has sent a drawing of his cute little number donning her cat suit and wondering what the boys of the 46th Armored Regiment want to see her about. We of the 51st Armored Infantry are rather jealous. We were wondering if you could possibly send us a picture of the Dragon Lady, since sooner or later we will probably be operating in her territory. We are very fond of the Dragon Lady here, and a drawing of her would probably top that of the Cat Wench. So the Cat Wench he's referring to is not the Black Fury, but Miss Fury, whose outfit was black. And he also says that a man sends him the cartoon. This is almost certainly the pinup that was sent to soldiers featuring Miss Fury getting dressed. And you can see it's signed Tarp Mills. Tarp Mills was actually a woman, one of the few successful female cartoonists. She was also a model and a very, very tough lady at the time, and would often base the character of Miss Fury on herself. So this soldier doesn't quite understand that, but this is almost certainly the pinup that was sent to Caniff with the Dragon Lady, which we're going to censor a little bit politely, which kind of outdoes the Tarp Mills image. Caniff would have prints, color prints of about 14 or 15 different characters made for different people, and then he would hand sign them and send them off, and never charged anything for any of it. It's astonishing, and I could not believe when we came across this, but this is a letter from a POW camp. These are Americans imprisoned in Germany who got a letter to Caniff. Dear Mr. Caniff, many of my fellow Kriegies miss Terry and the pirates. However, they could be satisfied temporarily with a glimpse of two of our voluptuous friends. POWs of Stalag Luft No. 1 will appreciate. Address on the reverse of card. For the sake of art, First Lieutenant H.C. Cannon, 20th April 1944. This tells you the extremity to which people were willing to write to Caniff to ask for pinups, right? This is a great one. This is from the Naval Academy from October of 1942. Your comic strip is one of the most popular at the Academy. If it is not too much trouble, I would like a sketch of your character, Burma. I would like it for personal reasons and also to satisfy the upper class. It is a question of getting the sketch or getting my duff paddled. I know that you will have pity on this poor plebes duff. Thank you for your time and trouble. So this poor plebes duff has gone down in comic strip history now. This one is another just standard letter asking for a drawing, but it's from Jefferson Barracks, so I thought I should include it. I want to thank you so much for sending me that lovely drawing. Oh, as a thank you for the letter he's already sent. It is swell, and I appreciate it very much. Right now, I am stationed at Jefferson Barracks, getting my basic training. As soon as I get set, I will have this framed and hang it in our barracks. Harry Katz, 5th February, 1943. Women also wrote to Caniff for pinup boys, for Pat and Terry, who were very, very sexy. So we girls in our house enjoy your comic strip, and we wondered if you might send us a sketch of Terry or Flip Corkin, to use as our chief pinup boy. So many of us have men in the Air Corps that your characters seem to typify them to us. Fascinating sort of substitute of Terry for the boyfriends and the partners and the significant others that are in peril. LA. And then this one is from Pittsburgh. And if you look at the letter on the right, it looks like every woman in Pittsburgh has signed this letter, right? We, a group of white-collar kids, are writing to inform you that Terry has been chosen as the official pinup boy in the office. How we love that guy. If it is at all possible, could you please send us a small autographed photograph of Terry? We would really appreciate it so much, because when we are tired and lonely, we can look up at that picture and see the beaming countenance of our favorite pinup boy. Please don't forget, because this is important to us. Give Terry our devoted love and tell him we are eagerly awaiting for the war to be over so that he can come home to us. And of course, again, we're projecting our longing for the actual men to come home through the characters of Pat Ryan and Terry and Flip Corkin. You have a brand of humor and tragedy in the story that isn't equaled in any other strip. I'm now convalescing in a veterans hospital, but thanks to your marvelous work, I'm able to enjoy my stay here much more easier. This is a great example of what we now call graphic medicine, people who are using art or comic strips or graphic novels as a form of therapy, as a form of healing. So this one from Stuart Airfield, West Point. And now we get into some fairly sad ones. So I do want to warn you, there's some tragedy here. When my husband entered the Army Cadets 2 years ago, I started cutting Terry out every day and sending it to him. However, my husband is now missing in the Southwest Pacific, and so he is missing Terry. I still cut it out every morning and save them for him when he returns. We'll want to know how Terry is making out. Also, it is the best way I can imagine to show my husband that never for a moment have I given him up for lost. Every morning when I read Terry, I think of how my husband would enjoy that particular strip, and it brings him closer to me. As soon as my little year-old son can read, he will also be a fan. Betty Matthews, 6 January 1945. This is one from a soldier talking about another one. A buddy of mine was shot down over Germany in the bomber named Miss Lace. So even the name of the plane is referenced to Caniff. He is listed as missing, and his family is almost frantic waiting for news. So if you could draw a picture of Miss Lace with her fingers crossed for Ellie, my pal, about 8 by 10 or larger if possible, it would be great. I don't think his mother is aware of who Miss Lace is, so I'm bringing her out our camp newspaper, the Palisade, and show her. I'll send stamps to cover the postage. Anything you do will be greatly appreciated. All the boys appreciate Miss Late, undated, Camp Shanks, New York. And if you there's this little cross here, which means that it was answered. So almost all the letters are answered. We rarely have one that isn't. And then for me, this is the hardest one for me. This one just really makes me think about a lot of things. Dear sir, my son, Edward Booth Jr., was reported MIA on November 27th, 1942. The only picture I have of him is in his plain navy suit. I am sending you his picture. I would like for you to make a drawing of him in his helmet and goggles, about 8 by 10, so I can frame it. I am a barber and don't have much money, so if it costs over $4, don't do it. I am asking you to do this because I follow your Terry and the Pirates every day, and I like the way you draw it. It's the best of the comics. If you do or don't make the drawing, please send me back my picture at my address. It is the only one I have of him. This guy sends this only photo he has of his son, asking for a drawing of his son in his combat gear so that he can mourn it through the artist that creates Terry and the Pirates. And you can see the big stamp answered here. So Caniff actually did that for him, which I think is truly beautiful. It was very common for people to write and ask permission to name their airplanes, their boats, their tanks, their jeeps, whatever large sort of war machines they had after different characters from Terry and the Pirates. So this is one asking or sort of showing off what became a very famous plane, a B-17. And this is the famous drawing of Miss Lace that would be on many different aircraft, but this one in particular. This B-17 named the Bit of Lace ran 83 missions without fail, which is kind of a record. The plane is very storied in military lore and military aerospace design. There are all kinds of fan paintings and homages to it. It is one of the few model kits that has never gone out of print. Everyone has always wanted the B-17 Bit of Lace, and you can see they're including Caniff's languorous drawing of Miss Lace there. And it also has a following among comic scholars. When we were at the Billy Ireland, they had us take a picture in front of a life-size image of Miss Lace, both in homage to Caniff and in homage to the airplane. A lot of them would write and ask for specific things. They would be very graphic and specific about what they wanted for their nose art. And the nose art wasn't just about sex or about violence. It was very much about this imagined community of soldiers. There was a lot of humor involved. There was a lot of camaraderie involved in the selecting and the choosing of these insignia. And we know that Caniff did dozens of them all for free. But he takes a more artistic slant. Some of them are funnier than others. This is for an outfit that's taking stuff over the hump. So we've got a camel with the hump going over the Himalayas. Two sort of masterworks in his insignia. The top-headed devil for the 400th Fighter Squadron, just an awesome design that has kind of the maverick look of the fighter pilot. And then what people now call the Batgirl, an absolutely stunning icon for the Navy Night Flyer Squadron. One of the most interesting single images I think he ever did. And again, dozens and dozens of these. And the last thing I want to talk about is just how Terry and the Pirates and Caniff's art would give personality and character and imagined community to these soldiers who were far away from home. They would create a family out of their bombers, out of their airplanes, out of their boats and assault vehicles, called Terry and the Pirates. There are 3 different dragon ladies here, all in various states of disrobe, but you can see how proud the captains are, how the crew really identifies with that commitment. The Madam X, which is using an image of Miss Lace, would also become an equally famous plane to the Bit of Lace. And I love this one because this is a whole fighter unit whose plane is Madam Shushu, which is a really obscure example of one of Burma's disguises. So these guys really know the comic strip well if they're using Madam Shushu to kind of define their unit and separate it out and give it some personality. And again, one of the best designs that Caniff did was called the Hell's Bells. And you can see here another fairly famous plane. it's a pair of Dantes, meaning Dante's Inferno, a pair of Dantes in panties. And even though, again, it's pinup art and it's leggy, these girls look like they could be pretty tough. There's a combination of like the showgirl and the woman warrior here that these guys really identified with powerfully. My co-writer Christy Nope and I both agree this is probably one of his best drawings. So what does all that give us? Conclusions and conversations. Caniff's characters provided a fascinating multimodal lingua franca for diverse intersecting World War II cultures and communities around the world. Readers and fans celebrated its emphasis on American exceptionalism, high-spirited adventure, and romantic sensuality in the face of much darker, more tragic realities. As we were talking about before we started, they didn't know how the war was going to end. They didn't know what was going to happen. Caniff's creations helped to foster morale at home, in camps, in Army hospitals, and in combat. His stories and characters became a means of performing not only love and duty, but also healing, mourning, coping with loss, loneliness, and especially fear. There is much we can learn and appreciate about our past and ourselves from these peculiar pictures and the pinups and personalities of Caniff's comic art. So thank you, veterans. Thank you, St. Louis Libraries and Kristen. Thanks, OSU. Thank you, Christy. Thanks to everyone who joined us today. What's going on here? Let's see. Am I still here? Yes, there we go. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Hold on. Oh, hi, Dr. Yezbick.
Hi.
We've got some questions.
Great.
One viewer sent in, I got a bit emotional as you read the letters. Is there a project to try and hunt down some of the drawings that Caniff sent in response to requests for images to honor or commemorate people's loved ones?
I would love to work on that. What we know for sure is that he had his, I don't remember exactly how many there were. There were close to a dozen different standards. So if someone asked for Terry Lee, he'd send to Terry Lee. Someone asked for a Dragon Lady, there were 3 or 2 to choose from, and he would personalize most of them if he could, and he would send those out. When it was a special case, like the barber asking for a picture of his son, those would be harder to track down. Christy and I have talked about trying. That would take an awful lot of time and resources, but we do want to do justice to this story. We want to do justice to these people who are missing in action. We certainly want to do justice to the mourning of their families. So that is a long-term interest that we're hoping to be able to do someday. Right now, there are so many letters and so many requests that our big project right now, once we get some time, is to match the letters with the insignia and follow. Because there were probably over a dozen, I don't even know, there could be several dozen airplanes named Dragon Lady or named Burma, and we got to figure out which one is which, and see which ones were shot down early, which ones had more storied careers, and that's a project also. So I certainly want to do that. You can see online the pictures of the prints, the standard prints that he sent out in most cases.
And you wonder, like the Betty Matthews letter, you wonder if you could figure out if her son was ever found, or I think he was MIA.
Yes. Lucky for us that, and hopefully it's good news. I mean, that stuff, those records are very carefully kept. So that is part of the second part of the project that we hope to get to soon. Right now, we just want to get these letters out there for people to see them. Because, if you think, oh, we're going to look at cartoonist fan mail from the 1940s, how interesting can that be? And like you said, it's so affecting. It's hard not to get teary-eyed. I've read these letters dozens of times, and the barber's letter and the housewife's letter still.
They're haunting.
Yeah, they are. They really are. And there's many more like that. I'm just giving you a sample.
Can you think of a comic today that was as influential or that everyone reads and responds to? I can't think of one. Was it the time and place?
Not in the same way. I think certainly for our generation, it would have been Peanuts, Snoopy, and Charlie Brown. Everyone felt a sense of national mourning when Charles Schultz passed away. For kids who grew up in the 90s, probably Calvin and Hobbes had that same kind of appeal. I think that's fair. Comic strips now, most of the people who read comic strips now read them digitally, read them online, which is fine. Fan mail is very different. Fan mail is now just to the website or tweeting or social media oriented. So That doesn't mean it's not still archived and it can't still have the same power. But it's not quite the same thing. We have these imagined fan communities, like the fan communities around Game of Thrones, or the fan communities around MASH, or the fan communities around true crime stories. So there is a kind of sense of family there, and people do work out, negotiate their issues, their tragedies, their joys, their sadnesses through these things. But it's not quite the same, because these are people risking their lives in a very different way. There are many interesting parallels, but none of them I think have the same weight.
I was curious, did the Air Force give permission for this nose art?
So yes, so in most cases, the Air Force had to approve it for all kinds of reasons, for strategic reasons, for safety reasons. They didn't seem to mind if they were pretty scantily clad, or some of them are rather vulgar, so I'm not showing those around, but you can imagine. And that didn't have to do with necessarily with Caniff's characters, but they did, everything had to be, if it was just nose art, I think there were more lax rules, and as long as it didn't violate any of the needs of the missions, then you were probably okay. For an official squadron insignia, or any kind of division insignia, that had to go through a number of checks and balances. That would take a little more time. The famous Batwoman I showed you, the Night Flyer, they had to change her hair. It was originally like burning red, and they had to change it to blonde, because the upper brass didn't want anything red to show up up in the air, because it would be an easier target. So I mean, yellow shows up, I guess, a little bit differently. So
Which artist actually did the painting of the nose arts? Because it wouldn't be kind of
sometimes we know and sometimes we don't. For the famous plane, for the bit of lace, we actually know who painted that. And for the Madame X also, that was really mislaced, we know who painted that. And then in the case of, I think it's Madame X, the plane went, it was an American plane. It was originally named Lace. And then it got traded to the British Army, to the RAF, or loaned to them. And then they changed it to Madame X, but they left the Milton Caniff image there. That one was in a firefight, and the image actually got burned off. And they didn't put it back on until much later in the war. So even the way they get shot up or altered or damaged has been very carefully recorded. In some cases, we don't know who did the painting. In some cases, we do. It depends on. Sometimes they reported it to their unit. Sometimes it was assigned by their units. Sometimes they would write back to Caniff and show them the picture. Sometimes they wouldn't. But that's a fascinating continuity that I would love to trace when I have time.
Is that one B-17 with the
Yes.
image still flying? Is it one of those?
No, it was decommissioned. I don't think it's still around. I'm not sure about that, but they have recreated it. There are so many homages to that plane. It's a very famous plane, because I forget, it was 83 or 87. I think it's 87 flawless missions. Some of the research we did on that, they said that it's really, of course, it's a great statement about the bravery and the quality of the crew, but it's an even greater statement about the ground crew, that they kept this plane running flawlessly for 87 dangerous missions. So it's one of the most storied planes of the war. So yeah.
Is nose art as popular today as it
Oh
was?
yes. Oh yes. There are nose art fan pages. There's nose art. There's books of nose art. There's nose art now, certainly. It's not quite the same. It's usually on vintage planes. I haven't heard of it on, and I'm not an expert on contemporary military aviation at all, so I wouldn't know for sure. But there's something about it that adds, again, men far away from home, men without the context that made them what they are. They tend to connect around these characters. So, and they aren't always women or pinups either. They can be all kinds of things. You saw there's one, there's a fish, there's one that's a camel. Disney Studios actually created dozens and dozens of very interesting insignia for different units throughout the war as well. There's a whole official Disney page about that, and I think a book as well.
another question is, I wonder if there's an index to the Antiques Roadshow items that might reveal some of the family copies of Caniff.
Maybe that's an interesting thing to think about. The one great thing about, and again, as I said earlier before we started, the real heroes of this entire talk are the archivists and the librarians who spent years cataloging these letters, organizing them into a form that could be managed. There's an excellent finding guide. Anybody can come to OSU and read the letters. Just to let them know you're coming, and anyone in the public can access these. And there are so many, and some of them are just like, hey, how'd you like dinner last night? And then some of them are absolutely devastating. And we read several thousand over the time we were there, and I think there's probably 2/3 more to go.
Well, it's great that these letters still exist and
Yes,
they're
it
being
is.
collected.
It
And you
is.
wonder how many are still, still exist, maybe, in attics or basements somewhere that just contain, fantastic thoughts, about different events.
Yeah, and what we really loved is that a lot of them, he had a full-time secretary who helped organize the correspondence. He signed all the things himself, and sometimes he would do special drawings. But if he answered it, he would usually leave a mark. We found very, very few that weren't answered, or stamped as answered, or marked as answered, or marked as need more information, want to do this right, something like that. He wasn't paid for any of this. This was all on his own time. And if you know anything about newspaper cartooning in the 20th century, time is everything. They never had any time. They were always behind on deadlines. So he did this just purely out of sacrifice for himself. He had no children. He was married, but he really did this because he really believed that he had to do something because he couldn't serve. So it's an interesting story. A lot of people say we wish he had kept copies of his responses, but I think there were just too many, and they could only do so much. Very few copies of what they sent back.
Are there any other questions in the chat?
Thank you for the roadshow stuff, Sarah. I'll have a look at that.
Well, Dr. Yezbick, thank you so much for sharing your
Thank you for
research
coming.
and your archival, delving into the archives for this
Thank you
fascinating
so much.
presentation. Makes me want to know more just about, the whole artist and art on planes and battleships. And
Yeah, I'll just add one other thing, and first of all, again, thank you all for coming. I know it's a very busy week. The holidays are coming. Everything's gone nuts. But I work with a lot of students who are going to be animators, who are going to be filmmakers, who are going to be media people, and I always tell them you should read Terry. And they think, well, that's an old comic strip. How interesting can it be? Terry is a beautiful, fun, wild, crazy story. I haven't told everyone I've talked to who said I've asked to read it. They come back and say thank you. I haven't finished it, but I'm going to. Like, they all really love. There's something really charismatic about these characters. There are a lot of heinous racial stereotypes throughout, and there are some pretty heinous gender stereotypes as well. And we have to take that with just an understanding that that world was not as balanced or equitable as ours tries to be. But the story itself is stunning, and you saw how the pilot's creed operates. You saw how the flight over the hump in the Himalayas operates, or the PTSD strip. There are moments like that that are just jaw-droppingly interesting, and we're lucky that the whole thing is in print and can be gotten. So, thank you again, everyone. I hope you all have a wonderful Veterans Week, Veterans Day week, and a great holiday.
thank you so much, Dr. Yezbick.
Thank you.